Hello friends, this video on digestion and absorption part 17 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. So now the question is, how does small intestine help in absorption? So we know that it is the villi and the microvilli and these cells which play an important role in the process of absorption. But how exactly it takes place? Let us have a look at that. So now the presence of villi or microvilli increases the effective surface area, which in turn increases absorption. This is exactly what I explained some time back. So if you have a wire like this and if you keep the same, in that same length, if you keep the wire like this, you will accommodate more wire in this case. Now when more wire is there, more absorption will be there. So that is the similar case here. Now in the small intestine also, on the surface they have these hair-like structures. So when you have so many hair-like structures, each of them are acting as absorption. So the effective surface area is increasing, and that is why absorption is also increasing. So let us have a close look at the structure of the inner walls of the small intestine, where we have the villi. So if you see, this tube-like structure which you see is the small intestine. So here this is how the small intestine look like, the tubular structure. So here outside you can actually see the layer of cells, and these longitudinal and circular layer of cells are nothing but the muscle layer, the muscularis. Remember, muscularis has a longitudinal layer and a circular layer of muscles. So these are the two layers of muscularis. Now even inside that you have the innermost layer. Here you can see the innermost layer, and the hollow structure in between, that is nothing but the lumen. So this hollow structure is going to be the lumen. And what are these? These structures which you see are nothing but the veins. So that is how the small intestine is also connected to the blood vessels, because when you absorb something, now absorption will take place through the villi. Now if you see this folding on the inner side, here you have structures like this, and these structures are villi. So here I have just unfolded this part and I am just trying to tell you what are villi. So here you see some finger-like projections, right? These finger-like projections are villi. Now this villi are actually in the inner side of this tube. So inside of the tube, when the food is completely digested, in the lumen part, you have all the amino acids and monosaccharides and all those stuff. So what will happen is these villi will actually increase the absorption rate. So they will absorb it, and once it is absorbed, it is passed on to these blood vessels, which will then carry it throughout the body. So once the absorbed nutrient goes into the blood, it is the responsibility of the blood to carry it to different parts of the body. So once it reaches the blood vessels, the job is done, right? Now let us look at a closer view of the villi. So if you closely look at the villi, you will see that they are richly supplied with blood vessels, something like this. See each villi. Here you can actually see the villi looks somewhat like this. But each of these villi actually looks somewhat like this. So the villi itself has linings like this of the brush border cells, as we told you. The border gives the appearance of a brush. That is why they are called brush border cells. So they in turn have microvilli, which in turn increases the surface area. So basically it is something like this. On the inner surface of the innermost layer of epithelium, they have villi like this, and each of these villi in turn has microvilli like this. So just imagine how much would be the absorption rate, because in order to increase the surface area, they not only have villi but they also have microvilli. So, and here inside you can actually see inside the villi you have the network of the blood vessels. So these are the network of the arteries and the veins, right? So that is how the arteries, veins and capillaries are associated closely with the structure of the villi, and this is how the absorption actually takes place. So if you have a close look at this, here you can see. So now if you have a closer look at this part also, where I am saying that there is microvilli, so you can actually see the presence of microvilli. This is how the microvilli would look like. So this is how absorption takes place in the small intestine. They have villi. Villi in turn have lining of microvilli, which increases the effective surface area, so the absorption increases. Now the villi is closely associated or richly supplied with the blood vessels. Once they absorb the nutrients from the food, they are passed on to the blood vessels, and then the blood vessels carry the nutrients to different parts of the body. So now, to conclude our discussion on small intestine, so please, I hope you have understood whatever we have discussed about small intestine, because this is the most important part which actively participates in digestion as well as absorption. So now here are some very interesting facts about small intestine. So the length of the small intestine varies from animal to animal depending upon their food habits. Interesting, right? Not all animals have the length of the small intestine similar. Now you will be more amazed to know that the size or the length of the small intestine in case of carnivores like a lion is smaller than those of herbivores like a deer. So most of us often feel that eating flesh or eating these kind of food, meat or flesh, they will be more difficult to digest when compared to plants. But that is not the case. Digesting flesh or meat is easier than digesting plant. That's because plants are rich in cellulose, because plants have the additional cell wall which is made up of cellulose. So when somebody eats plants, they have a lot of fibers and cellulose inside their body which are extremely difficult to digest. In fact, some of the fibers are almost indigestible. So now, since the herbivores like a deer, they eat grass and plant parts, so they have a lot of stuff which are difficult to digest, and the main organ of digestion is small intestine. Therefore, the small intestine is made longer so that the food can spend more time in the small intestine and better digestion can actually take place. Whereas in case of carnivores, meat or flesh is easier to digest because they do not have anything like cellulose. So they don't really need a longer small intestine. Therefore, the length of the small intestine is smaller in case of carnivores. Right? Okay. Another interesting thing is the small intestine is small not because it is too long, but because of its thickness. So if you look at the thickness of the tube of the small intestine, it is very thin when compared to the large intestine, and it's because of more thickness, the large intestine is called large and the small intestine is called small. So the name has nothing to do with the length of the intestine. So with this, we end our discussion on small intestine. So now we will talk about the last part of the digestive system, that is the large intestine. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more videos, attempt free online test, get free study material, find tutors and mentors. Thank you once again.